everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and today on Wandering DMs, we're going to be talking about assassins, stealthy solo killers for hires. Did you know that they were the second subclass to be added to Dungeons & Dragons? And we'll be asking the question, should they be PCs or maybe NPCs only? All that and more today on Wandering DMs.
Before we get into that, as always, I will remind everyone that at the end of the show, at 2 o'clock Eastern, we will be hosting our after-party chat. That is a private video chat with Dan and I and any of our patrons who wish to show up. You can join that group and join in on the after chat by becoming a patron at patreon.com/wanderingdms. Join at any tier and you'll get an invite to our private Discord server, and that's where we host the after chat. And hopefully we'll see you there at 2.
We always look forward to that every week. So at the top of the show, I'll put a little footnote. At the top of the show, I said that assassins were the second subclass to be added to D&D. They're tied for second place because, as we all know, paladins, everybody's favorite subclass, came out in Gary Gygax's Supplement 1 Greyhawk, and then Dave Arneson's Blackmore Supplement 2 to original D&D had both monks and assassins. So there's your first 3 things to really be added as subclasses to D&D: is paladins and monks and assassins.
Interesting. You know, when I was running, when I was first running old school D&D, when I first got into it, this would have been around, I don't know, maybe 2008, 2010, somewhere around that time period. It started with, you know, like really diving into BX as written, eventually migrated over to Labyrinth Lord, or Clone. And from there, I started using supplemental Labyrinth Lord material to introduce the things that I really wanted. And I introduced 2 subclasses. Do you know which ones, Dan? Subclasses I felt had to be in my game.
Okay. Druid and Paladin. How about that?
Close. No, it's Paladin and Ranger.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, you know, Rangers are closely connected to Druids. I'm going to count that as 1.5, right?
Similar. There you go. Anyway, there you have it.
Nice.
Should I have? Was it necessary? I don't know. It's a thing. It was an interesting stuff to experiment with back then.
It's attractive. You know, it's really attractive. When I think about Rangers, I'm like, yeah, I kind of want, you know, Lord of the Rings style Rangers running around. Doesn't make me feel bad.
I think where I landed though was eventually, you know, switching eventually to Original Edition Delta, where you've got this lovely table of feats, and I got to the point where, much like I didn't feel like the need for an illusionist, never wanted an illusionist, thought, well, just be a magic user and pick the right spells, and boom, you're an illusionist. And I think with a fighter, pick the right feats, and you're a paladin, or pick the right feats, and you're a ranger
or a barbarian. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
You go.
I will say up front that one of the things I'm not fond of as a habit of early D&D is the proliferation of classes. I personally feel that was an overabundance of classes, and obviously it gets player interest, and it can be a selling point for a new product, as we all know. But I feel that it's what they were doing was broadly inelegant, and that there doesn't need to be that many classes with that many class tables running around the wild.
This is such a tangent. I apologize, but it's a pattern we've seen over and over again, right? In second edition, you had all the kits show up, and then it became overwhelming and too much. And they said, "Great, we're going to wipe the table clean. Here's third edition, nice and clean and tidy. But how about some prestige classes?" And then you get dumped on with prestige classes. And then you know, fourth edition. I don't know what happened in fourth edition. Maybe this pattern happened in fourth again, and I'm not a fourth edition expert. Fifth edition comes along, and what's the latest we've heard? Isn't there like the new updates got like 100 classes or something stupid like that?
Well, the funny thing is that, you know, in when fifth edition first came out, right? Since third, they got rid of the concept of subclasses, right? So subclasses was a thing specifically in first edition. Sort of went away in second, gone from third, gone from fourth, gone from fifth, and specifically the term subclasses is now back in the to be revised fifth edition. They're calling all the choices, I guess, you make around third level with your character the subclasses, and they keep coming back.
Yeah, and again, like, did it really disappear in second and third? I mean, are kits and prestige classes not just subclasses? I guess not. They're a layer on top of, but that's kind of what it sounds like. What fifth edition subclasses are, right? That you start off as a fighter, and then by third level, you get to pick some stuff.
I should point out. Let me just get out for those that don't know this, right? So let me try to do this slightly in near chronological order, right? So the very first edition of original D&D, right, 1974, assassins are mentioned. They're not a playable class, but if you crack open the DM's booklet, Volume 3, you have how to run a dungeon, how to run a wilderness, how to run a barony. Right, and you've got a list of specialists that you can hire, assuming that you own a castle. And the single most expensive, it's about 10, I think. The single most expensive specialist that you can hire is an assassin, and it specifically kind of cautions the DM. If I can pull it up here on my machine, the assassin. The role of this hireling is self-evident. The referee will decide what chance there is of his mission being accomplished by noting the precautions taken by the intended victim. Assassins are not plentiful, and some limit on the number employable during any game year must be enforced, which I don't think is said about any other specialist. So I feel like, and I guess they're tied with the sage for the most expensive thing that you can hire. And so I feel, to me, this feels like, coming out of war game play, where you have maybe like in a Dave Arneson type, Blackmore type situation, where you have people running domains and baronies, and part of that high level play is that I'm going to hire assassins and try to bump off my opponents off screen, I guess, for a fairly high monetary amount. And the DM has to manage and handle that. And presumably you don't want an infinite number of assassins for a wealthy character in existence. But that was there. And then in Dave Arneson's supplement to Blackmore, it became a playable class, specifically a subclass of thieves. Fairly high abilities. You need a 12 in strength and dex and intelligence there, which is kind of hard to do if you're just rolling 3d6 straight, actually. Specific limit on their alignment, of course. Paul, what is the limit on assassin alignment in Blackmore?
Well, let's see. It's got to be chaotic, right? I assume it's the three. Wait, original D&D is there's three alignments, right? Yeah, yep, so chaotic. Right. Yep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Neutral.
Neutral. Gotta be
assassins
neutral?
must be. Yeah, assassins must be neutral on their first appearance.
Okay.
Right? Sure. That's hard to remember. Now, obviously, when you get to first edition, that was changed. They must be some flavor of evil. Which is what I'm more accustomed to.
I was just reading this text here. Hang on, I got my first edition book here, and I just enjoyed the high Gygaxian of this description that said, let's see, assassins are evil in alignment, perforce, as the killing of humans and other intelligent life forms for the purpose of profit is basically held to be the antithesis of weal.
Right. That sticks in my head. Honestly, that line actually really sticks in my head with and it's even useful as a guide to what Gygax was thinking about what alignment meant at the time. Frankly, that actually is a really useful clause, and it makes sense to me, and it always stuck with me. And when I go back to original D&D and I see that Arneson had them neutral, I have to kind of change my mindset about why that could conceivably make sense.
It makes sense to me if you go back to that definition of alignment being, who are you aligned with, right? Who do you have agreements with? And presumably assassin would be like, no one. Nobody. I'm a free agent. I will pay. I'll do whatever the highest bidder asks me to do.
Yeah, right. You can see that, right? You can totally see that. Yeah, just show me the money. And of course, the abilities of assassins have always been some mixture of they can use poison, they have a disguise ability, they certainly have sneak attack like thieves do, maybe some kind of subset of from the thieves, and then a special assassination thing, which is really super different depending on what edition you're sitting in.
Let's dig into this a bit, just because
later.
Yeah, I want to talk about why play an assassin? What are the mechanical abilities I get for choosing to be an assassin versus any other class? And this has always been a head scratcher for me, because the first thing you call out is they can use poison. Yes, I've seen this in the text of every version of Assassin ever. How does it work?
Right? I feel
the text
like
always just says they can do it, and then it gives you nothing. It tells you nothing about what the hell that means or how it works.
I feel like so my sense is that in first edition, just my sense from first edition is that there's language that more or less says player characters just should not be using poison. Using poison would make you evil, take you out of the game, kablam. And the fact that assassins are specifically allowed to use poison bypasses that completely fiat restriction. Is my sense of it. And then there'll be, and then of course it'll say that in the player's handbook, and then information about poisons is over in the DM's guide, Paul, of course. And in fact, little personal anecdote, actually. There is, I think in the, just going from memory, the DM's guide in first edition has a section on poisons, and it has, insinuative poison versus ingestive type poison. So insinuative would be that you stab them and it gets in your bloodstream. Ingestive, you put in their food and then they get toxin. And I think there's like 5 or 6 types of each. And there was an early point wherein I didn't have the DM's guide, and I think I borrowed somebody's and specifically took a mechanical typewriter, made a copy of the DM's guide poison information, and then accidentally left it at my grandmother's house. and at some point, my poor grandmother was like, "Dad, is this yours? Are you're keeping documents about poison?" And I'm like, sorry. Yeah, that's embarrassing. Anyway, it's in the DM's guide. I know that.
Yeah. I have to say, I can't say I've ever played a game where somebody said, "Aha, I'm going to get poison," and then we just knew how to do that, right? It was scrambling through the book, and then can this be right? And then either it was way underpowered or way overpowered. It just never made sense. Never made sense to me.
Yeah. I feel like in the core, of course, overpowered, right? In original D&D, there's a potion of poison, and you stab, and someone drinks it or gets stabbed, and it's save or die, bam. So I get the sense that there were early parties that were certainly wanting to make use of that overpowered situation, and that's why these kind of nonsensical restrictions just said you can't use poison came in later.
Right. But except that then you get this clause of, okay, here's a class who can use poison. Good luck figuring out what the hell that means.
Sign me up. Sign me up for the save or die, sir. Yes, please.
Oh dear. Yeah. So there you go. Okay, so I can use poison. Cool. I guess I can disguise myself. Or there's
they always have like a
rules for how that works.
Well, you tell me. You've got the player's handbook in your hand.
I got the player's handbook here. Okay.
Okay. Let me look at the Blackmore supplement. I have that over here. So,
all right.
Assassins are masters of disguise. They're able to assume dress and manners. There is only a 5% chance that an assassin will be recognized in disguise, or 10% if the assassin is posing as a member of the opposite sex. Oh, don't do that. Disguise checks must be made daily. Oh, here we go. Here we go, Gygax Arneson. Modify the chance downward by 1% for each 1 point in combined intelligence and wisdom that's below 20, which the intended victim has, i.e. a victim with a combined intelligence and wisdom of 18 only has a 3% chance of detecting the assassin. For every combined intelligence wisdom point above 24, the intended victim has a 0.5% better chance of detecting disguise, but dropping all fractions. And then there's some formulas here, and that's how it works.
Do you think it got better or worse in AD&D?
Probably about the same. Honestly, my guess is same-ish.
Yeah. Similarly, it just it starts off with just still a lot of specific restrictions. You can disguise yourself to appear as a human, semi-human, or humanoid of either sex. They can lower their height 2 to 3 inches or raise it up by 4 or 5. They can make the assassin look similar, appear much heavier. Slimmer or appear much heavier. Disguise can make the assassin appear virtually any class. There is, however, let me get back to it. There's a base chance of 2% per day of a disguised assassin being spotted. This chance goes upward by 2% if the assassin is posing as another class. Maximum of 8% Each concerned party is in proximity of the assassin will be checked for immediately upon meeting the disguised assassin, and each 24-hour period thereafter. Chance for spotting the assassin goes downward by 1% for each point below 24 of combined intelligence and wisdom. Okay.
I
can't.
How did they?
I can't. I only got through half the
was
paragraph. I can't do it.
I know. It's a weird mental state that they were in to write those things, and I get the impression that in play they'd probably just ignore them. I don't think they'd look it up. They'd just be like, "Oh, this guy's works." I don't know. Okay, now look, I try to avoid this so much on this show, but I gotta call out. I think that was Arnis. I gotta call out this double the chance of being detected if you pose as a member of the opposite sex, compared to the number of things that you might try to disguise yourself as, like possibly a different species, or 100 pounds heavier, or 2 feet taller or shorter, or something like that. Dressing as appearing as a member of the opposite gender is not the hardest thing in the universe. Right? I mean, it takes work, right? It takes work. I get it. I salute the skill set, right? That it takes to do that. But I mean, it's not instantaneous impossibility.
Yeah. I don't know. These rules. And then, like, here we are. We're looking at a subclass of thief, and thief has a nice table of straight, flat percentage chances. Hide in shadow.
Yeah.
Move silent. Right? Boom, boom, boom. Percent. Done. Why is disguise so much harder? Why? Can't it just be a percent? Just like every other thief skill?
Okay, I'm going to say that's to me that screams Arnisonian. To me, that just screams Arnisonian mishmash of percentages in a paragraph.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Is what that feels like to me. I could be wrong.
Okay, so confusing disguise skill, confusing use poison skill, but we can also maybe kill people. Maybe.
Let's talk about that later. I want to hold off on that, because that's a whole friggin' thing, right? But let me just briefly say. So here you have this core subclass in first edition that many of us cracked open, okay. Let me just throw up let me present a great comment by our friend Hoba Ogre here at the top of the show. Who said, "I ran into assassins when I got the first edition player's handbook. I remembered it was my first red flag for the game. I thought it was more of a profession than a class." And I can see that. So, the assassin class in first edition is one of these classic hot buttons for, cultural commentary about the game. And so it was one of the things that was very pointedly removed at the outset of second edition. And it's interesting that here we are. You get Arneson's Blackmore book introduces 2 classes, right? Monk and assassin, and it's kind of wonky aspirational stuff. You get to the transition between first edition, second edition. We did a whole episode about this previously. About they wrote a specific adventure called Fate of Istus that, within the context of the World of Greyhawk campaign world, had a plague go through the world and change the rules of the world to match second edition. And one of the things that it did is it removed monks and assassins. It specifically removed the 2 things that Dave Arneson brought in the game. And at the end of that adventure, all assassins had to change into normal thieves, and all monks were recommended to move to the different campaign world of Oriental Adventures. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So at least second edition started out right, and they got rid of, for social criticism purposes, they got rid of demons, they got rid of devils, they got rid of assassins, they got rid of monks. And then you go forward a couple years, sure enough, just like you said, Paul, they come back in the kits. The Complete Thieves Guide in second edition brings back assassin as a kit. And it tends to yo-yo in and out of the game like that. Third edition, it's not a core class, but you crack open the DM's guide, and sure enough, it's a prestige class. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Fifth edition does, in fact, have it as one of the archetypes or now subclasses of your rogue. So it has, it's still there after having been, ping-ponged in and out from edition to edition.
That's an interesting history with the assassin class. Did you ever play one?
I had one player. As DM, I did actually have one player that actually did take an assassin. And I mean, look, you have this menu of items in the player's handbook. It looks, interesting and exotic, and I want to try these different things. Why is it in the book if not to use? And, it at least started out as kind of a normal dungeon crawling type thing. And you could imagine, well, okay, I want someone who's stealthy, who's going to go in, take out the guards, I guess, or something like that. And it is funny because, maybe it was a combination of personalities, but the game did actually devolve to, having embraced the evil assassin character. The game actually did devolve to the players saying, I don't want to risk my neck in the dungeons anymore. I'm going to go around and start killing merchants and villages. Which wasn't, exactly what I intended. I tried to make it work, and then you run into a problem. And I think there was the discovery that with Unearthed Arcana rules setting a very high price on spell books, you could, I guess, bring a new player character in as a wizard, assassinate them, sell their spell book, and that was actually the most profitable way to go about your D&D. Mm-hmm. was actually the safest and fastest way to get money and experience with those rules as written. And that campaign didn't last super long. Yeah.
Yikes.
I'll say, in the first edition Rogues Gallery, there's a which half of that book is just like hundreds of random character statistics to use, and the back of it has personalities of like famous, people that you'd know as players, designers, and their, special characters. And one of them was an assassin named Lasavirian the Dark, who was apparently played by Alan Hammock. And I think appears there as like around 8th level or something like that. And he's always cloaked or disguised. Nobody knows what he actually looks like. He's got some magic rings. He uses poison. He's got a vast network of spies, and he has a vampire sword that drains levels when he hits. So apparently somebody managed to make. Apparently Alan Hammock managed to make a whole campaign around an assassin character.
Is now a good time to bring up the other place where I know of assassins being referenced in original material?
Okay, so now we're going to dig into, collectively, Paul and I are going to dig into the fact that assassins were in lots and lots of materials in the first edition era. And I will pop in and say, first of all, the World of Greyhawk, right? You get the World of Greyhawk campaign setting. There's assassins all over the place. There are the city of Greyhawk has a guild of assassins, and the guild master of assassins is one of the like half dozen people on the controlling committee of the city. Actually, most cities have a guild of assassins with a guild master. Frequently bands of brigands are led by assassins. Numerous small like bandit states have leaders that are assassins. And there is a nation state called the Scarlet Brotherhood that's entirely devoted to developing the Arnisonian types of monks and assassins and thieves. And assassins are the second most powerful clique, I guess I would say. They're called the Foster Uncles. And that kind of secretive country has spies all throughout the world of Greyhawk with their thieves and assassins and monks. So you see it in all kinds of adventures. So I could rattle off some, but what is the one that you're thinking of that's set in Greyhawk?
I just wanted to talk a little bit there about how guilds are built into the assassin class.
Yes,
like, certainly that's first edition AD&D description in my player's handbook here talks all about the guild and being a guild master. It's even the title of one of the levels, right? You get to 14th level, you're a guild master.
Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, I was going to overlook that because that's a really important thing. Those subclasses of that, the exotic subclasses of that era, right? They tend to have this, like you're saying, built into the campaign, rigid structure to the organization. And you're right, in original first edition specifically says basically every city or city-sized state is going to have a guild and going to have a guild master of assassins. If you could pull up, Paul, the image of where did I put it here? The image that has a green dot on it that I've got prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the experience table. Here's the experience table for assassins in the Blackmore supplement circa 1976. And you can see that there's an end to it. Like a lot of the normal classes don't have an upper end to it. But at the top end, it goes senior assassin, expert assassin, chief assassin, prime assassin, guild master of assassins. And you notice that guild master of assassins doesn't have an XP number, right? And the rule in original D&D is that anybody of, I think, assassin level or higher can just challenge the current guild master to a duel and kill them. And regardless of your level, you're now guild master of assassins. You don't get there by XP. And obviously that was changed in first edition, but what a wild difference of a mechanic that is.
Wait. Yeah. You're supposed to challenge them to open combat? Mm-hmm. Shouldn't you sneak into their house and kill them while they're sleeping? Wouldn't that be a better way to prove your abilities as an assassin than one-on-one combat out in the open?
Right, and that's what first edition says, right? It says any 12th level assassin, I guess any prime, just one level back. So just prime assassins may challenge the guild master to a duel to the death. And if the former is victorious, he becomes guild master. That's what it says.
Seems wrong. It doesn't seem like you're being a good assassin if you're openly challenging someone. I challenge you to a duel.
What does first edition say? Like you can challenge them a duel and then like ambush them with archers or something like that? I think that's what they say. Right. So it's interesting how they and then also I'll say first edition adds takes that out. You have to get there by experience, and then they add one more level at the top called the Grandfather of Assassins. That sounds like there's just one of them in the world, and you have to go to some exotic location, maybe the Scarlet Brotherhood, perhaps, and try to kill them in order to become the Grandfather of Assassins.
All right, you were asking me the material I know assassins from the most is my copy here of L2 Assassin's Knot. Right there in the title, The Assassin's Knot by Len Lakofka. I'm a huge fan of L1, Bone Hill. Great starting module. Awesome for kicking off a campaign. It's very sandboxy. It doesn't really have a plot, right? If you read L1, they're like, is there a plot here? Not really. It's kind of just a sandbox of there's a bunch of stuff going on, and there's some dungeons in there that you can go explore, but it doesn't tell you why.
There's an assassin in the wilderness. I'll say among the people you can run into the L1, there's an assassin in the wilderness of L1.
So L2 is a radical change from that, and frankly, much to my personal disappointment. L2 is, by its own description, a murder mystery. It says it right there in the text. This is a murder mystery. And specifically, the whole plot revolves around someone being assassinated. Okay, spoilers now for L2. If you haven't read L2, you can see this copy was given to me by a friend who kept rabbits, and the rabbits got at the module, unfortunately. But okay, that's not the spoiler. Spoiler for L2. So the main villain is a dual class cleric assassin, and according to the plot, basically, in the very beginning, when you get into this, it tells you that they specifically disguise themselves 3 times to throw off the scent of anyone investigating the assassination. They specifically put on 3 different disguises and are purposefully laying false red herrings as these other people to try and get the scent off of them before they then go in and ultimately kill the Baron of Restenford. Here's a couple interesting facts about that. Did they roll the 1%? Or whatever it is. How did that work? I wonder. Does that character have to walk in? If they walk into a tavern, do you roll for every person in the tavern to see if they see through the disguise? Okay, forget that. Secondly, fascinating. That's a dual class. I'm going to
explain that. That's very common. Okay, so that's probably a half orc, right?
What? The dual class? What are you explaining?
That character, right, who's cleric, assassin, has to be a half cleric, I believe, in first edition rules. I think they're the only race that's permitted that combination.
No, because it's no, they're human. They're human because they're not multi-class and they're dual class.
My mistake. Yeah. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah.
Got it.
Dual class cleric assassin.
Okay.
What I find fascinating about that is that clearly they went through some pains to give this character a very legitimate front, right? No, they're just a cleric, right? And I think that's very cool and interesting. And like maybe now, do I not have to roll disguise values because it's not a disguise? They really are a cleric, also an assassin, right? And it just brings me to this point of I don't know. I have a lot of problems with this module. A lot of the plot, it feels very forced and silly, and it's very linear, and makes assumptions about how the players are going to figure stuff out and where they're going to end up. So it's just total opposite of L1's lovely, kind of sandbox nature.
Yep.
Why make him an assassin at all? Could have just been a cleric. Could have just been a cleric who kills people.
Yeah.
And this is like if I get back to like I in college played an assassin briefly.
Oh, okay.
For a little while in a campaign that I was playing it.
Okay.
We were using a different weird rule set. It wasn't even D&D. I don't want to get too much into the details, but like, here's the interesting thing. Why do I say I played an assassin? Not because I had a special character class of type assassin. I played a character who was a thief magic user, multi-class, specifically chose spells to help with thiefy type things, right? So I was taking like invisibility and fly and like just all the kinds of things that would help someone sneak in and out of places. And then my character took money to kill people. There you go. I was an assassin.
That tracks. Yeah, that tracks. That's what you call that.
Yeah. I feel like the whole like making a class for it, making an organization around it, having the whole guild and et cetera, it just starts to seem ludicrous to me. Like, is it well known that you're assassins? It's right. Do you have your like assassin ID card? That seems preposterous to me. I feel like assassin should just be a thing you just do, not a class.
Okay, I will say I can sympathize with where this came from, of course, and I think many or most of us know that in real world history, right? The assassins, the word assassin comes from a particular religious sect that was active in the Middle East in around I think 1090 to 1250 or something like that. And my totally amateur understanding of Arabic etymology is that the word comes from a word that basically means fundamentalists. So it was, right, the real world idea, the real world order of assassins was a very regimented hierarchical structure where only particular people, a very small subset, could be authorized to carry out killings. And I can totally understand why the first instinct of the first game designers would be to recreate that. And so you have this recreation of a very hierarchical, very structured assassins guild running through the early editions. And if it needs to become something else later on, so be it, I guess. But I think they're trying to conjure the real world order of assassins a little bit, I think.
I don't mind even necessarily having an organization that is organized around assassination. I just don't see a need for it to be a class. It seems weird to me.
I agree. I don't disagree. And I'll also say as a little side note why I was jumping on that character needs to be half orc because for multi-classing, right? For multi-classing in first edition, only half orcs were allowed to be cleric assassins. And unless I'm totally hallucinating. And the funny thing is, remember that non-humans always had rather strict level limits. So, for example, a half-orc in first edition can only be a 4th level cleric, right? They could be a 10th level fighter. They're limited to like an 8th level thief, but uniquely, they can be unlimited level an assassin. I mean, of course, assassins themselves only go up to like 15th level or whatever. So if you want to make an arbitrarily high level, powerful half orc in first edition, your best bet is to take a cleric assassin, because you get all the heavy armor from clerics, you get all the bladed weapons as an assassin, and then you can proceed to an indefinitely high level with the assassin track. So through those early editions, half-orc cleric assassins are super, super common, particularly at high-level play because of that.
I want to briefly touch on, and I'm sorry, Dan, if I'm stealing your thunder here. Mm-hmm. You pointed out, I was looking for references to assassins. The other place I found them is my copy of the new copy of Swords and Wizardry. And you have a graphic here. Can I show this graphic? Is this all right?
Please do.
Jumping the gun. Great.
Thought that was interesting this week.
Yeah. So this is promotional material for Swords and Wizardry. The book shows open and happens to be on the page for assassins, which is fascinating. And so I was like, I don't know. I started reading into Assassin. There are some interesting choices in the Swords and Wizardry presentation of Assassin.
Okay.
And this is coming up for me because you're talking about half-orcs being allowed to go to any level of assassin. And then I wanted to look up, like, well, what other races can be assassins? I don't think there's any limit, right? Like, any race can be an assassin. Is that true?
In first edition, everybody but halflings is what I see.
But halflings, no halfling assassins. They're just too jolly. In
Swords and
Wizardry, only humans. The end.
Okay. All right.
Only humans.
I think they might now. If our friend Matt Finch is basing it on original D&D, original D&D specifically said that only humans will become assassins per Dave Arneson in Blackmore.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Yep.
No.
Allowing other races is some kind of weirdo Gygaxian corruption of the original concept. So,
there's a nice little Fight Club homage here about. It immediately starts talking about the Assassin's Guild, and it says, of course, that the first rule of the Assassin's Guild, one might say, is that no one talks about the Assassin's Guild.
Okay.
Which I found very amusing. There's a section about poison, which again is a delightful head scratcher for me. He tells us that assassins are able to use poison on their weapons without the risk of making basic errors. Fighters who coat their swords with poison might make a mistake of absentmindedly rubbing their eyes before remembering to wash the deadly toxin off their hands. Assassins are fall prey to such basic errors when using poison.
The idea of that rule I'm familiar with, but that's a nice.
I don't know. I'm hoping there's more stuff in here about poison somewhere. I haven't found it yet. I didn't look super hard, but I'm like, is there some rule about using poison on your sword and maybe you accidentally screw it up and poison yourself?
I feel like that might be the only place. I feel like to me that has the sense of we needed that rule, but it only appears here in the assassin poison ability to make it special.
But it doesn't give me stats. It doesn't tell me what percentage chance my fighter might accidentally rub his eyes. I don't know. No numbers.
Yep.
No die roll. I don't know.
Yep.
Anyway, apologies to Matt Finch if I'm picking on your stuff here, because
I think it's
through it. But I wouldn't be surprised to discover there's maybe a section of poison in the rules for using it.
I thought it was very interesting that this is the spotlight, right? This is the sales spotlight for the promotional imagery for the recent Swords and Wizardry Kickstarter this past summer. That you want assassins, we got assassins. I mean, of course, it does tend to be alphabetically the first class, right? Like so, in first edition, if you alphabetize the classes, it comes out first. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're just showing. Maybe that's just the intention. There's just the first page of all the classes that we have. Maybe
I will say this as someone who is about to launch his own Kickstarter and had to make mock-ups of a book that doesn't exist. Had to do that. Yeah, you want the open page to be visually interesting. And looking at this, I've got a nice big header. I've got a nice piece of art. I've got a couple tables. Good choice. Good choice for your marketing material.
Yeah. Okay.
Regardless of whether it's assassins or fighters or any other class.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could have just as easily given the spread on magic users. Again, nice blocking there. Although maybe even the assassin's better because it's blocked out into a couple.
I agree.
It's a visually appealing spread.
So, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
I agree. That's probably why. Yeah. Also, hey, we got assassins. If you don't buy this,
also assassins.
But I want to talk about the mechanics. I really want to talk about the mechanics of the special assassination ability, because for me, this is one of the places whereby I first learned it as in its state in first edition, and when I came late to original D&D and saw Assassins in the Blackmore supplement, I had this big aha, one of my larger aha moments of, oh, this makes so much more sense in original D&D, actually. So here I guess I'm praising Dave Arneson. So the table, I have a table with a blue dot on it.
Oh, not that one.
See, that's first edition. That comes later. That's advanced D&D.
There you go.
And not that the table's going to look a whole lot different, but you get a table and you have level of assassin compared to level of victim, and it comes up with percentage chance of assassination. Now, really, that's not really the super interesting part of this, but to me, the part of it that, and it's a huge block of text, so we're not going to put it on screen here, but the text to assassins in original D&D and Blackmore supplement. Remember, assassins were initially an NPC specialist that you could hire in the original D&D book, right? And just said, there's going to be some chance. When you hire an assassin, there'll be some chance that the DM must adjudicate that they kill the victim, right? So a lot of the text for the assassins in Blackmore basically is an elaboration, to my reading, an elaboration on that, what happens when you hire an NPC assassin. And so it has a paragraph on cost. It says, the cost per mission, as shown in Volume 3 of Original Dungeons & Dragons, is based on the hiring of a 6th level assassin here, right? Reduce the amount by this percentage and increase the amount by this percentage for higher or lower level assassins that you hire, right? And 10% of the fee goes to the guildmaster. And then under experience, it says assassins gain experience for successful assassination. So if a fee is paid, mission's completed, you get experience of some number formula, such and such, right? So to me, and the on this table here, which is several pages later, the very short little note, it just says base chance for successful assassination will be dependent upon the level of the assassin and the victim. The referee will make further adjudications necessary to particular case circumstances. So at no point here, right, which is different from later editions, at no point does it talk about being in combat. At no point does it talk about surprising the victim. At no point does it talk, on an encounter level basis. To my reading, this entire table is just talking about what happens when you hire an NPC and send them off screen to do the mission. Right. And this specifically answers the problem in the original Little Brown books of how do you decide whether the assassin that you hired succeeds or not. It's this table. It's not meant to be an in-combat ability. It's meant to adjudicate a campaign level thing that's not happening in front of the characters. And that makes sense. If you can hire assassins and send them off, this table, the initial intent was to answer that question of, does the guy that you hire succeed or not? And that actually makes sense to me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the use of sages, which frankly are a thing that I love to use in my campaigns. And my players have always loved it, of like, okay, well, we need this information and we don't want to waste a ton of table time figuring it out. We hire someone to go find out for us. Great. Excellent. Give me some money. Well, some game time will pass. We'll hand wave it. Don't worry about it. Exactly. Maybe I'll tell some story about how the character came up with the information or not.
Yep. Exactly. I agree with that. And then when you flip, right, so again, that was Dave Arneson's work as far as we can tell. And then if you flip to where I have the purple dot that you had up right. So here is the first edition assassinations table. It's in a DM's guide. It's funny because it's prominently on the same pages with all the basic attack rolls. Right, so just 2 hits and saving throws and assassinations. Those are the 3 core things in first edition that obviously you need on these tables. And here it's changed, right? So once, Gygax here has modified the intent of it, so it's not an off-screen mission thing. Now it's a specific in-combat ability. and the assassin in question needs to surprise the victim. And there's also an asterisk here that says, or you could use this table for anybody that surprises somebody who's totally helpless, right? And in one attack, you get this percentage chance to outright just eliminate, kill the victim. Even if you don't make this chance, you still get a hit automatically. And if your weapon is poisoned, they have to save versus poison anyway. So now it's become this very specific. To me, this was so weird. This was so weird about adjudicating the surprise and do you see them? And I guess I'm supposed to, like, it actually says something about like reduce it for defenses, and I'm like, what defenses? What are you talking about? Again, that makes sense in a campaign level of like, oh, I've got a castle and lots of guards. But if this is like round number 3 and I'm standing next to you, what defenses could there be other than just your AC and your awareness? So it's one of these things that evolved from a very coherent solution to a particular problem to something that's become more baroque and kind of hard to make sense of. But here you are in first edition, and you have, in that situation, you have this chance to just outright kill an opponent. Like William said at the top of the show, completely bypassing the opponent's hit points. And then as you go forward in editions, this idea is maintained. Sometimes they call it the assassin death strike ability. And it's slight, and as usual, it gets dialed down a little bit. So I think in third edition, I think it becomes like a saving throw to be killed, right? You pull out the assassination strike by surprise, and then honestly, there's a fairly easy save versus die saving throw. And currently, the assassin ability in 5th edition, if I recall correctly, you hit them by surprise, and there's a saving throw, or you take double damage. So now it's down to just double damage, I guess. And I think in 5th edition you have to be 17th level to get that ability.
Huh.
Yeah.
Weird.
Right.
Weird. Yeah. Right. It's definitely very strange, and I would say, it really strikes me as like they're struggling to retrofit a concept into the rules that already exist. Right. We are already very used to poison long before the assassin shows up. Right. Lots of monsters have.
Yeah.
But there's a poison potion, right? We know how poison works. If you accidentally ingest it or get stabbed with it, you make a saving throw or you die. The end. And so it just seems very natural. And I can't tell you how many players I've had who, when after encountering their first monster with poison, are then immediately saying, "How do I get the poison out of that thing? I want that." Right. So
exactly.
Like trying to attach this to a character skill makes no sense to me. Maybe what I could see is giving the assassin an ability of, how to harvest venom from monsters. That would be cool. I'd be down for that. But this idea that like they know how to use poison, good luck figuring out what that means. Or then adding some special death strike skill that approximates, to me, sounds like just put poison on your weapon. Like what's the difference?
So I think that, the reason this was on my mind, part of the reason was on my mind, aside from the Swords and Wizardry Kickstarter, is that a question showed up on Stack Exchange RPG forum that I visit once in a while. And what this question was about a week ago, was a 5th edition DM. And in their campaign, one of the characters had gone off on a solo, gotta kill an enemy fighter while they're sleeping mission, and they played through with the one character at the table, played through sneaking into their base, infiltrating the area, avoiding all the guards, and did actually wind up totally undetected, standing over the victim while they're sound asleep in the middle of the night, holding a weapon. And so the DM had to decide, totally defenseless, can't defend themselves at all, in the fiction. If this character holds a dagger to their throat and just slits their throat, is there any possible way that this could fail at this point? And the 5th edition DM said, I arbitrarily, by fiat, said yes. At this point, you automatically can hit them in a sensitive area, and they're automatically dead. And interestingly, one of the other players, And the DM's asking, did I do something wrong? Because one of the other players strenuously objected and said, that's not in the rules. You're breaking the 5th edition rules here, and I don't like that. I think that the consensus of the answers was largely, yes, you're the DM and you can do whatever you want. But if you're going to change rules in this way, you should have communicated this possibility to all the players at the outset of the campaign. Because your 5th edition players are going to be building characters and digging very deeply into the elaborate rule set. And if you start permitting special abilities that weren't documented, then a player like that has a legitimate grievance and is going to be upset. And so I found it interesting that basically, 50 years on, our 5th edition DM, their instinct was exactly the same as an early DM, but working in the structure of 5th edition, they were running into a lot of static. And I feel like maybe you need an assassination table. Maybe you shouldn't have even done that solo with the one character. Apparently, all the other players were sitting there while you did this with the one character. So maybe it would have actually been a solution to send the one character off screen and then just resolve that by a single roll with an assassination table. Maybe that would have been a more elegant solution.
Yep. I can see that. I also, in that situation, of course, now I'm immediately questioning, like, what is the rule for, like, coup de grace in 5th edition? I don't know off the top of my head, but, like, certainly in an earlier edition game, you wouldn't argue you need an assassination table to say, well, my magic user casts sleep on the bad guy. I walk up next to him and I stab him in the heart, right? Like, yeah, we allow that, right? Like that. That happens.
I think in 5th edition, I might be a little shaky. I don't think they have a coup de grace rule. Anytime that comes up, someone says that was a 3rd edition rule. That's not in 5th edition. You have the capacity to crit someone, and I think they have an optional rule for massive damage, right? So people tend to say if you manage to hit the massive damage number, then they're going to be eliminated, I think. But I don't think they have a coup de grace rule. And 1st edition has a line where it just says, if you attack someone who's totally, completely helpless, they're just eliminated in one round. And I guess technically by the letter of 5th edition, that's nothing like that in there now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a common. I've seen this in RPGs, a number of times. Of like, I've got someone totally helpless, and someone's got their dagger to their throat. It could be a villain, right? Is a threat, right? Or it could be in a modern game a gun to the head, right? Is there, can they just automatically eliminate them? And that continues to be a source of real contention, handling that.
Yep.
Someone's going to say obviously yes, and someone else is going to say that's not in the rules.
Right. And probably their opinions change based on whether they are perpetrating the act or being the victim of it.
There you go. Yeah. Or seeing someone benefit. Apparently, in this case, seeing someone benefit from him, and I guess being jealous. I guess.
Yeah, I guess. I think often that comes from a perspective of defensiveness of like, oh God, what door are we opening up to that's going to happen to me down the road, right? If an NPC gets me in this position, am I also going to lose my character just like that?
That's legit.
But that's legit. I'm absolutely projecting on this third hand account that I only just hearing from you. So who knows?
And in the Black, I'll say just to agree with you in the Blackmore sense, if I'm sending assassins against other player characters in the campaign, can just a single percentile roll just wipe out a player character? That might be a little tough to swallow, honestly.
Do you want save or die in your game or not? Right? Okay.
Not while I'm sleeping.
Yeah, we are out of time. We're out of time. I'm just going to give this one quick little teaser. The thing that I didn't get to, we were talking about Assassin's Knot a little bit, and about the appearance of assassins just as a plot device in adventure. I wanted to compare that, frankly, to Shadows over Bokenhofen, which you can see us run through in the early episodes of 10 Dead Rats, where there's totally an assassination happens, and I would say handled much better in this module. Much better.
Okay.
So, Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in the after chat.
I would look forward to that. So final thought, Paul, from you, should assassins be their own class?
Absolutely not. I think that's ridiculous, and I don't want them at all. I think it should just be a thing you do.
I think I basically concur. I think it's overly extravagant to have them as their own class. I would like thieves, rogues or thieves, to be doing that kind of thing. But those abilities, if it was a menu of abilities to choose from, I think that's legitimate. If there was a feat-like system, I think that's okay. 5th edition subclass system is honestly not the craziest thing in the world. And if you do have like a consistent rule for attacks on helpless people, that would make sense for everybody. A consistent rule for use of poison would solve some of these frustrations. And if you are playing high-level campaign play and you actually are hiring assassins and sending them off to do jobs or spies, having some kind of legitimate rule to handle that is not bad either. So a lot of these bits and pieces, yes, but the one dedicated class, I'm not up for it.
Yeah, I'm all for having a systemized way to handle off-screen assassination. I think that makes sense. That's just like Sages in my mind. Yeah, sure, why not? But I could see wanting to systemize that for really any off-screen task you're going to hire someone to go do that may succeed or fail, right? Like, I don't know. I'm all for that. But yeah, I don't think it requires custom mechanics. I don't mind players exploring the idea of I want to become an assassin, but again, it should, in my mind, that should be more of a role play experience of just, so is there an assassin's guild in my game? Let me invent that content to do it. Is my player approached by someone and offered money to kill someone? Cool. That's okay. You could do that.
And it even makes sense in campaign that, like, do I want to send someone in who's like, what's your class? Assassin. Or what's your class? I'm a wizard.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. I've actually got magical spells, right? No problem. It would actually seem like a more coherent mission statement to actually pick someone who's not doesn't have an assassin ID card.
Yeah. A little weird. Viewers, if you have an opinion for or against assassins as a playable class with custom mechanics, leave us a comment in the comment section here of the YouTube video. We'd really love to hear your opinions. Maybe you disagree with us. That's okay. We'd love to hear it, and maybe have further discussion.
Definitely. And of course, remember that you can like, follow, and subscribe to us, the Wandering DMs. We are on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter and Facebook and GitHub and TikTok, or whatever they're called these days. And we have to handle Wandering DMs on all of those sites. So look for us there and you get updates on upcoming shows.
If you prefer to listen to our show in audio-only podcast format, you can find those podcasts on our website at wanderingdms.com. Also through other podcast carriers such as Google Podcasts, Spotify, iTunes. Pocket Cast was the one that I was promoting last week. Check out Pocket Cast. I like them. If the site that you're using to find our podcast offers the ability to do so, please rate and review our show. That helps us out a lot, makes other users of that site aware of us and able to find us, and we really appreciate it.
We really do. And of course, big thanks to our patrons who support the show here. If you'd like to join them, please visit patreon.com/wanderingdms. You'll see our different benefits, including, like Paul said at the top of the show, access to our Discord server where the conversation is always continuing, and our after party chat that we have every Sunday. We'll be there in about 10 minutes to continue the conversation, maybe talk more about Shadows over Bogenhafen or other examples from first edition D&D that we didn't get to talk to. Talk about like there's an assassin in the sinister secret of Saltmarsh that drives me crazy, drives me nuts. That maybe I'm going to complain about in the after chat a little bit. But we'll be there in about 10 minutes. So other stuff on the channel. I'll be back Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. For the end game of Pool of Radiance that I'm playing through for a while. So look for that. And of course, Paul and I are live here every Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So please join us again next week for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.